It is our role as the adults to create safe and sacred environments for the children to feel the vastness of their emotions so that they too do not have repressed emotions and go into their life and their adulthood and their adult relationships with all this repressed energy. Hey babes, welcome to Codependency Alchemy, your go-to podcast and community for the raw and sometimes uncomfortable truths that we need to face in order to create relationships that actually feel good. Together, we'll explore what's underneath patterns like codependency, anxious attachment, and the mother wound, and learn how to build authentic connections. I'm Melissa, your favorite codependency and relationship coach, teaching you all the lessons that I learned the hard way so that hopefully you don't have to. If you've ever felt invisible or like you're always putting yourself last, you are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Today is a special episode for all those mamas out there because we are going to discuss how to regulate your nervous system, especially when your child is in the middle of a tantrum. As a previous educator and someone who had my own in-home school, someone who has their master's in early childhood education, I have worked with hundreds of children and I have seen all kinds of tantrums. I've honestly probably seen more tantrums than any one single person needs to ever see in their entire life. And I've learned so much about the sacredness of the tantrum and how to show up for children in the midst of one through my own experiences. And I have to say, the way that I related to tantrums 10 years ago is vastly different than the way that I relate to them present day. And I truly believe it's due to this work that I'm going to share with you guys today in this episode. I think when we incorporate these practices and allow ourselves to really get to the root of what comes up for us when we're experiencing a child who is having a tantrum, we can totally show up to tantrums in a completely different way that is way more spacious. And I didn't know that that was ever possible, but I have real life experience of it in my life. And so I know it's possible, and I'm really excited to share this wisdom with you. Now, I can't tell you how many hours I have clocked on just childhood education as someone who used to work as a teacher in a Montessori school. I took every child who I held space for as my child. Like, I am spending the majority of my time with this soul, with this being. And so therefore it is my responsibility to be impeccable and integrous in holding space for them. And in that first year of teaching and having my own classroom, let me tell you, that was an awakening that I don't think anything can prepare you for. There is nothing more triggering than a child. I say that with so much love, but children have this magical ability to illuminate and reflect back to you all your unresolved trauma from childhood. Like I said, it's a magical gift that they have, that they possess, and I am so grateful that I got on board with that inner journey that first year of teaching, because if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the children who are in my classroom and being a teacher and holding that kind of space for children, I don't know that I would have ever gone and tended to my unresolved trauma. They were the access point for me to see the stories and the beliefs and the repressed emotions that I had shoved deep down into my soul. And when a child is experiencing their full range of emotions so outwardly because they haven't been as conditioned as we have been as adults, it can be triggering to the part of us that didn't get to express our anger, that didn't get to express our sadness. For me, I even struggled with witnessing children in their joy because I also felt like I wasn't able to or didn't get the opportunity to really be in my joy as a child, because I also experienced a lot of parentification. I had very young parents. They were teenagers when they had me, and worked multiple jobs. And so when children were in their joy, that was even triggering for me because I was like, it didn't feel safe. Like I was shushing them. It was just so much. But I quickly realized that like this is an opportunity for me to tend to the part of myself that didn't get to feel joy, that didn't get to feel anger, that didn't get to feel sadness, and how important and just like a non-negotiable that it is our role as the adults to create safe and sacred environments for the children to feel the vastness of their emotions so that they too do not have repressed emotions and go into their life and their adulthood and their adult relationships with all this repressed energy. Because emotions, as much as we've been like taught and conditioned to believe that there's good ones and bad ones, and we should feel happy and joy and we shouldn't feel sad or angry. I mean, those are conditions that I feel like I grew up in, and I think that a lot of people relate to that. When we can change our perception and perspective around anger and sadness being bad and actually find safe ways to nurture and nourish the expression of those emotions, just like hold space for those emotions just as we hold space for joy and happiness and elation, like, and love. Hold space for those other emotions as well with the same type of reverence. That is how we're going to cultivate an emotionally intelligent generation. And that is what the children coming forward, I think, in these like last couple generations, probably last few, they really need that. They really need that environment where they can have autonomy and sovereignty and fullest expression of self. I think we all needed that. I think we all deserve that. I think we all needed that type of environment. However, many of us didn't have that. And so as adults, and we're always learning from the generations before us, that's why you always hear like, oh, I just don't want to turn out like my mom, or like, I hated that my parents did this, I don't want to ever be like them. Like every generation has that, right? Our parents said the same thing about their parents, said the same thing about their parents, and you know, our kids will probably say the same thing about us. But where can we make sure that we are doing our absolute best, which we all are at all times, but doing our best to cultivate and create safe, sacred environments for all emotions to be felt in a, again, safe way. So the first thing I want to share with you all is this thing that I learned in one of the courses, many courses that I've taken, is that tantrums have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I don't know why this was so pivotal for me when I was working with children every day, but something about that solidified something big in me, because as I'm holding space in the middle of the tantrum, I remind myself tantrums have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They will always end. And I think that for me, before I really allowed myself to let that sink in, and before I learned that, I felt like a tantrum was never going to end, which is why I quickly tried to get it moving and fix it, right? Like, how can I get you to stop crying? How can I get you to stop screaming? How can I make this go away? Because I felt like if I didn't, it would go on forever, which is totally unrealistic and like wild to think that they would never end. Like, of course they end. But when you're in it and emotions are heightened like that, it can feel like it's going to last forever. And so I want you guys to take that with you and just hold on to that as a tool, a very simple tool to hold in your pocket when you're experiencing a tantrum with your child, is just reminding yourself that every single tantrum has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it will come to an end. And the more that you can stay regulated through that tantrum, the faster they're actually going to be able to move through that beginning, the middle, and the end. And so keep that in mind too. Like, the more I can stay regulated and centered and just remind myself that this is going to have an endpoint, and at that endpoint I can then go make sure I tend to myself. But just right now, in the middle of this emotion, let me hold this safe and sacred space for them to feel their feelings, and then I'll tend to myself after. And this is the hard part about being a mother, I think, and being someone who is a caretaker for children, is that we have feelings and emotions too. And I was going to say unfortunately, but it's not necessarily unfortunately. It just is. The children attune to our nervous system. The children regulate their nervous system through us being regulated ourselves. They are attuning to us. So if we are dysregulated and we're trying to fix and we get frantic and we get overwhelmed, our child attunes to that. They're very, very sensitive beings. They feel on a level unlike anything. So if I'm angry and I'm heightened and I'm overwhelmed, our children are going to reflect that because they are tuning to us. So I always remind myself that right now in this moment, use my breath to anchor. Take deep, long breaths. Remind myself that this will end and that it will end sooner than later if I can stay grounded and regulated. Just hold space for them to attune to me. I almost see it as like a frequency when you play like music. Like I want to operate at a frequency that like soothes so that they can soothe. And then once they're soothed, I can go and like explode somewhere else, because you're going to need to feel your feelings too, because tantrums will bring out all the shit. So I want to kind of go into the 3 different sections of the tantrum just to kind of help you, because you'll start to see the pattern, and I think that can be really helpful too. So the beginning of the tantrum. The beginning of the tantrum is the trigger. There's usually emotions and feelings that have been felt through different experiences, usually through the day. And so at one point, the children like become full, basically, like a lot of feelings, a lot of taking in, all kinds of information, right? They're seeing through a new lens, like they're experiencing the world, a lot of things they're experiencing for the very first time. And so it's a lot of information to process. So once they reach this pinnacle or this like peak of fullness, then they have their explosion. So there's usually like one thing that's just like the thing that tumbles the entire blocks down to the ground and just crashes. This is why oftentimes your child is amazing at school, and then you pick up your child, and then as soon you don't even get to the car and they're already having a full-blown meltdown. It's because they've been holding it together, bringing in information all day, and now they finally feel like they're being held in this safe and sacred container with someone who unconditionally loves them, and now they fall apart. That's the same reason why you hold it together at work, your best self is there, and then as soon as you get home, you just kind of like freak out and everything triggers you, and now you're projecting onto your partner. It's just because you're finally in a safe environment that you feel like you can just let it all go. It's the same exact thing. And I think that will happen less and less the more that we give space for these emotions to be felt in the moment, instead of needing to repress them all day, every single moment of every single day, and just allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling in the moment that we're feeling it, and having a healthy expression of those feelings as they come up. But we were taught to just hold it all in and then explode, and hold it all in and then explode. And I think there's an opportunity here to allow for a different way of being for our children. And that's by teaching them how to express their emotions in a healthy way that isn't through projecting, but really meeting those emotions in the moments that they come up. And I'll teach you guys how I did that in my classroom with the children. So the beginning piece is the trigger. And you can't possibly know what the trigger is. It's always something like very random, seemingly random. It's because you put the carrots on the left side of the plate and they wanted it in a bowl. It's, they didn't want that much milk. They wanted a little bit of milk. They just wanted this much. And it's always just the littlest thing, but they find it so that they can get this release because they've been holding on to something all day. And they just need to release it. So they find literally anything. They don't want to sit in that chair. They want to sit in the chair that you're sitting in. Like, it's always like seemingly silly, if you will. But they're finding the exact thing that they need in order to have their release. So that's usually the beginning. If you're watching the video on this, sorry, like the sun is just like beaming in. So hopefully it doesn't like mess up the camera. But the middle is usually the anger. This is the part that's usually the most triggering for us and that we have the hardest time holding space for. And it makes sense, right? Because most of us did not have healthy outlets for our anger. So when a child is in the middle of a tantrum and they're in that middle, this is where they say, I hate you. You're the worst mommy ever. I want you to die. Like, I've heard all kinds of things. Like, children have said the most wildly hurtful things to me in the anger part of their tantrum. And what I try to do in that phase, that middle phase, that usually looks like a lot of anger, they want to hit things, they're trying to throw things, is first make sure that you, if you're around other children or siblings, them, like, everyone is safe in the environment, including the child having the tantrum. So sometimes, like when it was in the classroom, I would let the child know that I was going to pick them up and I was going to move them to a safe place where they could feel their feelings. And I would let them know before I picked them up, I'm going to pick you up now. And I would move them to a safe place, usually outside of the classroom, so that no one gets hit with a block, no one gets punched, or no one gets a chair thrown at them. At home, it's making sure that the siblings don't get hurt. So it's just taking them to your room and laying them on your bed. And they're not going to be like, okay, yeah, take me to a place that's safe. Like, they're going to tell you you're the worst person and don't touch me and all the things. And you can validate them and say, I hear that you don't want me to touch you. I want to honor your wishes. I want to make sure that I put you in a safe place before I put you down. And then I won't touch your body. Letting them know that you hear them, but you're also going to hold the boundaries. I think this is where sometimes we get too scared to hold the boundaries. Well, they told me no, and so I need to honor their no. And I get the point of that, because we want to honor autonomy and sovereignty, and I don't disagree. But when there's safety in question, you are the adult, and so therefore it is your responsibility to hold boundaries. I hear you saying no, and it is my job to make sure that everyone is safe, and so I'm going to create a safe environment for you to feel. Try to say as few words as possible in a tantrum. And then once you've checked to make sure everyone and everything is safe, then you just let them explode. And I will literally just sit there, and every once in a while, if they're saying things, I'll repeat back what I hear them saying. I hear you saying that you're really angry. I hear you. Again, as few words as possible, because usually they're already overstimulated. So if we try to reason with a small child, this is not the time to reason with a small child. Honestly, children under the age of 6, they don't have their reasoning mind developed yet. They're in their feeling body, which is why emotional intelligence is the most important thing that you can do between birth and 6 years old. Their logic, reasoning mind, not that it's not developed or developing, but that's coming more online in the second stage of development. So just having that awareness that they're not going to logically get, if you throw that block, it could possibly hit someone. They're not connecting those dots, and it's just adding to the stimulation. So just repeating back what you're hearing them say. I hear you say that you're angry. You wanted to sit in that chair. I hear you. You wanted to sit in the chair that I was sitting in. I hear you. And just hold space. And what's going to happen when they're not overly stimulated, that everyone is safe and they're able to safely feel their anger and scream out, is that they're going to reach the ending point. The ending point is usually much easier to hold, because this is where sadness comes through. This is where they start feeling the emotions. This is where they start crying. This is when they start they're probably already crying in the anger part too a lot of times, but this is where they actually start coming inward and they want to be held. This is why it's so important for us to hold that sacred container for them to tantrum, because we want to show them that they are loved despite their emotions. Because what I feel like I was taught, and what I think was modeled to a lot of us, is that love was withheld from us when we had those big feelings. And so we shut them down, because we learned that if we have those big feelings, love is withdrawn. We're put in timeout. Things are taken away from us. So don't feel anger, because you'll lose things or you won't receive love. Don't feel deep sadness and throw a fit and have these big emotions, because things will be taken away from you. Love will be withdrawn. And it's sad to say, but that's what a lot of us were working with. And so it is this huge generational cycle that we get to break by modeling and showing our children that they are loved despite their emotions, that we can hold them unconditionally. This is unconditional love, right? I love you even though you have anger. You are still worthy of love even if you feel anger. You are still deserving of love even when you're feeling sad. And I understand that there's this belief and story that by showing up in that way, coddles them. That's not the word that I'm looking for, though. What do people say? They say that if they do that, they're like rewarding bad behavior, right? There's a word that I'm thinking of that I can't think of. I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue, but they're word that they're basically rewarding bad behavior, right? This is just my 2 cents. This is just my perspective. I don't believe that children are malicious and manipulative in that first stage of development. Based off of what I have read and learned, if a child is in a tantrum and I see them as being manipulative, I'm going to show up different in holding space for that child. I'm going to show up in resentment. I'm going to show up in frustration. I'm going to show up in annoyance, and I'm going to push them away, which is not helping them attune to my nervous system, which is exactly what they need. If we want to teach them empathy, if we want to teach them how to be emotionally resourced and support their emotional intelligence, then I'm going to have to be the one who models that. And do I really want to model what it looks and feels like to be resentful, frustrated, annoyed? I feel like I could get really on my soapbox about that rewarding bad behavior thing, and I just feel like that maybe has to be a different episode because we haven't even got into some of the meat of this episode and we're like 20 minutes in. So that's the sequence of a tantrum, that beginning, middle, and end. There's a trigger that they find in seemingly something small usually. That middle is the anger, allowing them to feel that anger. And then that end is that sadness where they're feeling the deep underlying emotions within. And they usually want to like be loved, be held, be seen in that. You can if they did something that hurt someone, if they did something that caused harm, you absolutely can talk about it and bring it up just at a neutral time, not when their emotions are heightened. And I think that when we hold space for these types of explosions and tantrums like this, as opposed to just time out, you're in your room, or time out, you go and sit in the chair, like that isn't teaching them anything about regulation. That isn't teaching them anything except for you do not get love, like anything, when you are this way. And I just always ask myself, like, is that what I want them to learn? Is that when they feel anger, which they will feel anger because it is an emotion that we all feel as human beings and that isn't going away. I don't want them to think that they are any less deserving of love when they are feeling that emotion that is going to come up in their life. So it's just something to consider and something to think about. So in regards to us regulating our nervous systems around tantrums, what I really want to emphasize is that there is usually, and I feel very confident, like almost 100% on this, there's usually an underlying story or belief that you tell about yourself when your child is in a tantrum, which is why you try to fix it or why you become dysregulated in the middle of a tantrum. So let me explain. If a child is experiencing a tantrum in the middle of a restaurant or a grocery store, let's say a public place, oftentimes we want to diffuse it and make it go away and make it stop because there's a story that we're telling ourselves about our child having these emotions in public, right? Other people think I'm a bad mom. They think he's a bad kid. They're not going to like me. They're going to think I'm disruptive. And that's where our nervous systems then get dysregulated and we start freaking out a little bit. Right? And it makes sense. So I found for myself that doing shadow work and really getting to the root of what I was making tantrums mean about me was so helpful for me to see and tend to, so that when the tantrums came up, I didn't necessarily have that attachment as an unconscious thing playing out. I was consciously aware that I had fears around being perceived as a bad, let's say, teacher or a bad caretaker, because I used to nanny for children as well. And so I can tend to that part of myself and acknowledge that part of myself without now projecting that story onto the child by now trying to fix their experience. Does that make sense? So, what are we making the tantrum mean about us? And this is where we make their discomfort our discomfort, right? This is where we're trying to fix it. This is where we're overriding their expression of their emotions because you're making or taking their tantrum personally. If they're tantruming, I'm a bad mom. And there's that attachment. And so now I need to fix it because fixing your tantrum and making it go away then changes that story for me. And we're trying to like prove or validate something within ourselves. We're making their processing of their big feelings and emotions be about us. And so when we can start doing that shadow work and really bringing awareness to that hidden aspect of ourselves, that hidden attachment, then we can actually show up in presence for our child's tantrum without the attachment there. And that is going to, I think, tremendously help us in staying regulated in the middle of the tantrum. This is also why making sure that you have practices put in place in your day and in your life to resource yourself. So when I was a teacher, what I had put in place for myself is every day before I got out of my car and walked into the classroom, I held space for myself and I would place a hand over my heart. I would meet my inner child in the garden in my heart space and I would just tell her I love her and that she doesn't need to show up and protect me today and that I've got this. And that helped me stay regulated for a few hours until a classroom of 25 plus children it's just always probably going to dysregulate you at a certain point. I think I'm not a superhuman. Let's just say that. And so what I noticed is that would usually carry me through till lunch. And then once all the energy of lunch and recess happened, I was usually feeling like I was walking a thin line between regulated and dysregulated. And so in my classroom, set up meditation time because I needed a moment to make sure that I could also regulate myself so I could hold space for the remainder of the day. So asking yourself, how can I create the structure in my day and in my life so that I can show up with more patience and more presence to the children or to my child in those dysregulating moments that are inevitably going to happen, right? And some days you might need more supports than others, but it's just like that thing that they say on the airplanes, right? Like we need to make sure our oxygen mask is put on us first before we put it on our child because we'll pass out otherwise. It's the same exact thing that happens with tantrums. If you don't have things in place to fill your cup up and resource yourself, you're going to be running on empty, and then you're going to be trying to put that oxygen mask on your child when you are nearly passed out. And your child is not going to feel safe when you are passed out sitting next to them. They're only going to get more dysregulated. So it is so, so, so important to make sure that you have put into place things that you need to hold space for yourself and fill your cup up so that you can show up and be able to hold that sacred space for them when those big feelings come up. Because when you do this, what you end up building is more capacity. You build more capacity to hold the influx of emotions and to be more anchored into your calm. And when you're more anchored into your calm and you have that capacity, you're able to hold space for their emotions without that judgment and without those stories and those attachments, because you've already tended to those at a completely different time outside of the tantrum. Now, because I know this happens, you can do all the things. You can prepare all the things. You can set the structure in place. You can do that shadow work outside of the tantrums and get to the root and tend to that part of you. You can do all the things, and you're still going to find yourself smack dab in the middle of a tantrum, and you were patient, but now we're like 45 minutes in and your child is still screaming at the top of their lungs, and you have lost that sense of center. That is going to happen. I know because I have experienced it. And so when dysregulation happens to you, and it doesn't have to be 45 minutes in, like you have your own life and your own stresses, like it can happen 4 minutes in, right? Just if it happens in the middle of the tantrum and you find yourself in a state of dysregulation, the things that I do are these 4 things. I first ask myself, what am I making this tantrum mean about me? Going back to that shadow work, what am I making it mean about me? And can I just acknowledge that part of myself that is making it mean something about me? That can help a lot, even just doing that one thing. Secondly, I ask, what does that part of me need right now? Do I need to take a deep breath? Do I need to tap my partner in? Do I need to let my child know that I love them and that they're going to be safe in their room, but I need to go take a few breaths in the bathroom and I'll be right back? I've done all of the things. I love you. I hear you. I want to show up as my best self for you, so I'm going to go take a few moments and I'll be right back. And they don't have to like it. They can kick and scream even more, and they'll say like, I don't care, never come back. Like, who knows? They say all kinds of things, right? Like, if you just making sure that they're in a safe environment and removing yourself, taking a few deep breaths, doing what you need to do to come into center, screaming into a pillow on the other side of that door. Again, like I said, tapping your partner in, calling your mom or calling a friend and just saying, hey, I need some support. Like, what do you need? What does that part of you need in that moment? And thirdly, the thing that I love that Eckhart Tolle said is all it takes is one conscious breath to come back into like presence. And so oftentimes when I found myself in a state of dysregulation in the middle of a tantrum is I remember my breath. So I have quite literally pulled up my phone in the middle of a tantrum, put on Insight Timer, which is an app that has like a little like meditation bell or whatever, and I'll put 3 minutes on the timer. And in those 3 minutes, I will take as slow and as long of breaths in and out as I possibly can. I'll close my eyes. I'll place my hands on my knees. If you do this in front of a child, they are so curious. I've done this in the middle of a tantrum, I don't know how many times when I am dysregulated, and they will almost, I won't say, I don't want to give you guys like unrealistic expectations, but a lot of times they will stop and they will start asking you questions. What are you doing? And I'll just say, I noticed that I was getting really dysregulated with all the screaming, and so I want to take a few deep breaths so I can calm down my body. Do you want to join me? And then they're like, sure. And I'm like, great, you can pick the bell. What bell do you like? This is the one I chose. Like, you're redirecting the energy, right? So that can be an awesome tool too. If you notice that like this is going way long, like we're never going to get out of this. I am now losing my sense of center. I'm about to scream and kick louder than they are at this point. How can I redirect the energy? I bring myself into center and regulate myself. And now what I'm doing is I'm modeling how we shift from big extreme feelings to calm, and showing them that they have the power to do that for themselves as well. And that is emotional intelligence. And that is what we get to model to children. So if it's hard to hold that beginning, middle, and end of the tantrum because you're dysregulated, that is an amazing tool that I've used that has helped me so many times in big feelings. And I've noticed that that's worked with a 1-year-old and it's worked with a 9-year-old. I've seen it run the gamut, right? So it really can work with any age. And maybe it doesn't work every time. Like maybe it's just nostalgic for the first few times, but it's always something that you can come back to, and it's always modeling a really great thing for children to see. And then lastly, I know I said 4 things. This is kind of like after the tantrum. Take space. Find a way to take up some space for yourself, whether that's being witnessed by somebody else, by a friend, by your partner, by yourself in the mirror. Just look at yourself in the mirror and say like, I see you. That was really hard. And you did it, and you did the very best that you could, and you deserve a bath. Like you deserve the shower. You deserve the piece of chocolate. Like whatever you need to replenish yourself post tantrum, take that. Take that space to resource, because another tantrum is going to come And you want to make sure that you have grown your capacity, you've held yourself, you've allowed yourself to process the emotions that come up around the tantrum so that you can hold that space the next time that it comes up. Now, I know this episode is getting kind of long, but there is something I want to share with you guys that I did in my classroom as well, because I think it can really help with these big feelings and emotions and teaching emotional intelligence to children. Again, I've done this with children that I had in a classroom as young as 1 in certain years and as old as 9. So this really works for a wide range of ages. So what I did in the classroom is I created a wall of, I used like these picture frames, and each picture frame had a color. There were 5 different frames with different colors. One was yellow, and it represented a bunch of like happy emotions. If you look at a, what do they call it? It's like a emotions wheel. I'll see if I can find one and put it in the show notes. But I basically color coded them happy and then listed a bunch of emotions and feelings and sensations that could go with that said emotion. So happy maybe feels light, free, spacious, tingly, and excited, and correlated that to the yellow picture frame. And then I had one for anger, and I had one for sadness, and I had one for calm, and then I had one for, like, we called it deep sadness, which, like, you don't need to do that one. You can stick with the 4. That one's really helpful. I just happened to have that last one, but it wasn't used very much, so I wouldn't necessarily like focus on that one. When we did the activities, we just stuck to the 4: happy, sad, angry, and calm. And even though there's tons more emotions, it really just helps set the base and the foundation for emotions. So they each had a picture, and I had a picture of myself, and we had those on the wall as well. And so when there were big feelings and there was a hard time using words, I could just ask them to show me on the frames what they were feeling in that moment, and they could take their picture and put it on angry, right? So sometimes they were just so angry they didn't even want to say anything, and it was just like, could you show me where you're feeling what you're feeling right now using the frames? And they were almost always willing to do that. I don't think I ever had a child tell me no around that. And one, it gets them moving their body, it gets them contemplating, what is it that I'm feeling right now? And then what we did as a group, so you could do this as a family, is that for each emotion, come up with 3 to 5 things that you can do as a family when you're feeling that emotion. So this is the way that you get to express and move that energy. And this is what I think we were not taught, or many of us were not taught, that we really would have benefited from, to make sure that we're not repressing our emotions. So as a group, we came up with 3 to 5 things that we could do to express that we were happy. Some of those examples, and doing this with children is so amazing because they have great ideas. Like, I don't think I suggested any of them. Well, I think maybe I suggested a couple, but they came up with so many great ideas. So when they're happy, the way that they can express their happiness or their joy is through giving someone a hug, or drawing a picture for someone, or what was another one? Dancing. And so those are really great ways for them to express happiness and joy. For calm, there was like, I had a lot of stones in my classroom, and we had this heart stone that was rose quartz. So one of the things was, like, if I wanted to really express calm, I would hold the rose quartz in my hand and put it over my heart. Another one was like sitting and reading a book in the meditation corner. For anger, that was the important one that we really needed support in expressing. We had a specific pillow in our classroom and in our space that they could do anything they wanted to that pillow. They could punch it, they could kick it, they could scream in it, they could bite it, whatever, they could do it to that pillow. They can't hit, scream, or kick or bite me or their peers, but they could hit, kick, scream, hit, bite the pillow. And if I saw a child wanting to go and hit another child, I would quickly interject myself and be like, it looks like you want to hit, let's go hit the pillow, right? Like, you get to hit something if that is what your body is feeling like you need to do, but here is a safe way for you to move that energy that isn't going to hurt or harm another person, right? What we were taught is like, hitting's bad, and then we tell people don't hit. But like, sometimes I need to fucking hit something, and I need to move that energy. And if I need to hit a pillow, like, that's going to be way better than me hitting a person, right? And I think that the fear that comes up is like, oh, well, then I'm teaching them it's okay to hit. No, what you're doing is you're teaching them what it is okay to hit that isn't going to actually cause harm to another person, instead of repressing that anger and repressing that desire to hit. That's going to just come out when it hits its breaking point, because we're always going to hit a breaking point, and that's usually when we are projecting our anger onto other people. And usually we do it in the form of words, but sometimes people do it in the form of physically harming people. This is, let them hit something, but let them hit something that isn't going to actually physically or emotionally harm another person. This is way better than repressing it, in my opinion. So that was one of the things for anger. And then the other one, which was the all-time favorite, was they could write or draw, because some of them were like 1-year-old, right? So they could draw why they were angry. And so for a 1-year-old, they're like just scribbling on the page, right? It's not like they're doing this whole immaculate drawing, why they were angry. And then we would burn the piece of paper. So I would actually use a lighter, and we would burn it, and we'd put it in a bowl of water. And it was this whole ceremony that we did. And it was really, really beautiful, actually, to see it all play out. So if they chose that to be the way to move their anger and their energy, then what I would do is I would invite them to grab a bowl, a glass bowl, and we would fill it up with water. We would call in the spirit of water to support us in transmuting our anger. We would call in the spirit of fire to help us in transmuting our anger. And then they would hold the piece of paper. I would light the paper on fire, and they would place it in the water, which I'm like holding right there. So it's like not it. I mean, I could see why it would be a safety hazard, but I felt safe enough for us to do that, and it went beautifully every time. And so those were some of the examples of things that we did for happy, calm, and angry. And sad, a couple examples were like, tell someone why you're sad and ask for a hug. Another one was to cry, like find a safe place to cry, or cry in the meditation corner. And when they chose the thing that the way that they wanted to express their emotion, I would then ask them, like, that was a beautiful and safe way for you to express and feel that emotion. Do you want to continue to feel sad? Do you want to continue to feel angry? Or would you like to shift into a different emotion, right? Letting them know that they have autonomy and they have choice with everything. And sometimes they're like, no, I'm still angry. It's like, okay, what do you want to do now? Do you want to choose a different way to express anger? Or do you want to choose, light something on fire again? Not something like something specific, like the piece of paper that they write on. But then they would choose it again, or choose whatever they felt called to. And then I would ask them the same question. Now, would you like to stay in anger, or would you like to shift? And usually after a couple of times, they're like, I want to shift. I want to shift to calm. And then they want to ask for a hug, and then they want to hug you, and then you hug them, and then you're on your merry way. And why this, I think, is so profound in those early years is because you teach them that every emotion that they feel is a valid emotion that we all feel. So we normalize the feeling of all emotions. And then you remind them that it is important to process and express those emotions so that they don't become repressed. And we show them healthy ways that they can begin to do that on their own. What's really beautiful is that they'll start coming up with their own ways that are outside of the ones that you wrote down. And all they're doing now is building their piggy bank of resources and tools. I don't know why I called it a piggy bank, but they're building their toolbox of resources and tools and practices that can help them in processing their emotions rather than repressing them. What was great is that, like, I also got to do this in the classroom as well. So how did they learn how to do it? Me modeling. When I was feeling angry, I would express my anger. I'm feeling so angry that, the mailman keeps not picking up the mail I put in the mailbox, and it's getting frustrating. And then I'd like walk over to the angry cards because we had them near the picture frames, and I'd go through them and I was like, oh, okay. And I'd go grab the pillow and I'd kick the pillow a couple times. And then I would take a deep breath and I'd go to the calm cards and I'd pick a calm card and I'd grab the rose quartz and I'd put it over my heart and I would take a deep breath. And then I would go and do something else. So they like literally got to see me moving through that process, which helped support them in being like, oh yeah, this is what we do. This is how we get to move through those emotions. That's how you teach. You don't teach by just telling and then you get angry and then you yell at your partner and then they learn like, oh, well, when you're angry, you yell at your partner. Like, so we want to be really mindful of what we're modeling and showing our children, any children that we're in caretaking for. So yeah, I wanted to share that practice because it was really, really powerful and profound and super supportive. And it's getting really dark here. Sorry, guys. I'm recording this in the late afternoon, which is not usually the time that I record. But yeah, I really hope that that is supportive for you guys and that if it resonates, some of you guys can implement that into your homes. What was really sweet, I want to share this little anecdotal story, but I remember I was feeling really frustrated one day, and I can't even remember why I was feeling frustrated, but one of the children in my classroom, she came up to me and she was like, just placed her hand on my leg and was like, would you like to hold the rose quartz and take a few deep breaths in the other room? And it just felt really powerful to see how much this teaches empathy, especially because I think deep down I harbored that same fear. Like, what am I teaching them? Am I teaching them it's okay to hit and kick things? Am I teaching them that it's okay to like light things on fire? You know, there's always that fear, but underneath all of that, I'm like, I never saw I never saw those like harmful things that I was really afraid was going to happen, like an exacerbation of those emotions in an unhealthy way. If anything, all I saw was deeper levels of empathy that grew within each child, that they were able to witness their friends who were maybe feeling angry and maybe give them a little nudge or encouragement that there were ways for them to express it and that they didn't have to like hold on to it if they didn't want to. And there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a 3-year-old come up to you and ask if you want to hold a rose quartz and take a few deep breaths, and to see that level of empathy in such a small child. It'll change you. It will change you. It is so, so fucking powerful. And I think it's just truly a gift when we can create environments and spaces for children to feel their feelings in a way that is healthy for them and for those that they're in relationships with, right? So I know that that was a really big topic that kept coming up, and I'm sorry it took me so long to record another parenting episode, but I do love having these conversations about ways that we can show up for children and support them. And even if you don't have a child and you happen to get this far into this episode and you're still listening, these are great. That's a great tool to use for yourself. Like, this is the same structure, the same tools that I use to do my own inner child work when my inner child's having a tantrum. Because even if we don't have physical children in our life that are experiencing these big emotions, we probably do have an inner child inside of us that is throwing a tantrum from time to time. I can speak for myself, and I know that that happens quite often for me. And I always come back to this, like, can I meet her in that tantrum? Can I see what the trigger was? Can I see what the emotion is behind it? And what does she need? And how can I meet that need for her? So yeah, that's what I have for you guys on this episode. I know this one was a little bit of a long one. If this episode was helpful, you can support the podcast by liking it, leaving a review or a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to help me keep this podcast going, you can join our Codependency Alchemy membership. It is our community on Substack. And right now you can join and get a year of support for only $63 a year. Like I said, a year. I'm just repeating myself. It's been a long day. But I do want to say that every single person who joins the membership, you are a big reason the biggest reason, the only reason this podcast can continue to go. So thank you so much for supporting me and being able to continue putting out this podcast and serving so many people across the world. Codependency Alchemy, the podcast, is listened to in 70 different countries. It is a movement. It is reaching so many people across the world, and it's all made possible due to you, all of my members in Codependency Alchemy. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know you all in our chat and in our Substack lives. So it's a beautiful community. If you're not a part of it, it would be an honor to walk alongside you and have you join us. I'll leave the special discount code for the $63 for the year in the show notes. So if you want to join our community, make sure you use that special link. And that's what I have for you guys today. Okay, I feel like my voice has gone hoarse. It's been a long day, but I love you all so much, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you next week. Bye.